Let's not forget the poor people who died this day all those years ago, and the family members they left behind. But if there's even a glimmer, even a hint that there's something wrong with the information that's been given to us regarding what the events that went on that day, and the fact that the BBC reported that the tower fell 23 minutes before it did, is indeed a glimmer and a hint, and it needs to be looked at. Hey everyone, so I wanted to talk about, well, September 11th today, and it's on my mind a little bit. So I think most people in the West, it's a date that's kind of etched in their consciousness. So a lot of people have asked me about September the 11th due to some of the stuff that I've spoke about in my videos about the idea of a new world order and the Fabians and stuff like this. So September 11th was a part of me changing my worldview and asking the question why, like what's going on the planet. And that came about initially with me because of what I know about numerology. So I think a lot of you will know. If you don't, I've studied numerology and the symbology behind it. And for those of you who don't understand what numerology is, it was the first ever was Pythagorean, which is from Pythagoras. Now I feel you should know this before I speak what I'm going to speak about, so bear with me. So Pythagoras, who we all know as one of the founding fathers of mathematics, he basically in his work created the system of numerology. And numerology, what he was saying with that was that basically one of the materials that is reality, that is consciousness, that is everything that you see, is numbers. You have geometry, numbers, you know, and they come in the form of light, sound, angles, vibrations, echoes, so on and so forth. So this is what he was establishing with numbers, and the idea was that numbers are never an accident in your reality, and they are part of the fabric of the reality we live in. So if you look at our reality as a cake and you say that something baked the cake, you would say numbers is one of the ingredients that they baked it with, if you want to put it in that sense. So in using numerology in my life, I've gained a lot of insight into reality and spiritual goings on, and into my own self as well. So I have a belief, as most do with numerology, that it's a way to take a glimpse into the workings of reality and help you to gain spiritual knowledge in that way. Unfortunately though, there are other schools of thought on the planet. For instance, the Luciferians or Freemasons have a belief of manipulating numerology, so they see it as an ingredient of reality that they can manipulate along with many other ingredients that they believe is theirs to manipulate. They don't have any sacred belief on it. They just think it's there to be used to their advantage now that they understand it. So this is something with numerology which has gone on for a long time based on the occult symbology around the planet. And a lot of different ancient persons have had different forms of numerology, but I always use Pythagorean. And Pythagoras should not be discredited. You couldn't listen to me now without his mathematics, so you should listen to everything he had to say. You wouldn't listen to music without him, because he's the man, the founder of the music scales. And contrary to the modern day story that it came about by watching someone bang a hammer on something, according to the writings of his disciples, he said it was because he can hear the planets, and the music scale we use is the sound of the planets. And when he was asked how you can hear a planet, he said, I've lived before, I can do many things. So he was saying he's been reincarnated, but he can remember. So, stuff to think about when the founder of all mathematics that we use is saying that he was reincarnated and that he could hear planets and stuff. So his numerology is definitely something that should be taken note of. So in his numerology, to give you another little tiny glimpse into it, the way it would work is you add digits to a single digit, or you have core digits as well. So for instance, with my date of birth is the 30th of March 1985, so you add 3 to 0 to 0 to 3 to 1 to 9 to 8 to 5, and you come to 29. So you can't have 29, it has to be reduced again, so you add 2 and 9 and you get 11. So in numerology you have numbers 1 to 9, and then you have 2 other numbers which are in Pythagorean numerology deemed as what they call master numbers, and those are the 11 and the 22. So my life path as a human being is the path of the 11, and in accordance with Pythagorean teachings, that means that the way I would live my life is someone who expresses themselves as a spiritual messenger, as an intuitive, and as a psychic. And I am a very intuitive person, and I have grown to feel that I do have a spiritual message lingering inside me. So you can make of that what you will. The other numbers 1 to 9 all have their own significance and their own skills and abilities, and I can actually sense when someone is a certain number. I met a guy here last year called John, and I told him you're a 9 in numerology before I knew anything about him, and we added up his date of birth and he was a 9. So anyway, that's numerology. And in the Masonic beliefs, they have a reverence for 9, 11 and 22, the power numbers. 9 being the number of consciousness, 11 and 22 being the spiritual number, and the 22 is the number of the master builder. So I know about their numerological beliefs, and that they believe they should use it to manipulate, if you like, consciousness, reality, the workings of things, rather than use it to have a glimpse into the mysticism of reality and consciousness, the magic of it, if you like. So September 11th, obviously 2 of those numbers that they hold in high reverence are present, 9, 11. And I saw this immediately when this went on. I started looking into it. So 9, 11. And if you look a little bit closer at that date, 9, 11. So September 11th, 11 years exactly prior, at 9 minutes past 9, George Bush Sr. started a speech, and in that speech he spoke about the New World Order publicly for the first time. He said the world has a chance at a New World Order. Creepily, that came 4 years after Rockefeller had stood in the UN and said, we have a real chance at a New World Order. All we need is one more global catastrophe or disaster, and we can maneuver the world into a new world government, a one world government ultimately. So it's very unusual that Rockefeller said that at the UN conference, and then he said that on September 11th, and then September 11th happens 11 years later. So also on that date, the initiation of building the Pentagon was on September 11th as well. So that's just to give you some examples of this thing with 9/11 and these elite families. So something unusual about September 11th is if you count forward 911 days from that day, you end up on the Madrid Bombings, which were another tragedy that happened in Madrid, obviously. And again, it was a heinous crime and tragedy that went on, whatever it was that went on, or whoever it was that was behind it. So also on the day of September 11th, the first plane to hit the tower was Flight 11. And the towers, they took at this point I'm quoting another researcher's work, Rick Clay, who's no longer with us, sadly. But Rick was an amazing mind and a blessing to this earth. And he was also a fellow human who had encounters with 1111. And like I say, he was a blessing to this world, and he was a blessing to the consciousness of humanity. And I recently listened to his music CD because his father sent me it over to Tanzania in the post because I'd never heard it, so I was happy to hear that. So Rick pointed out that the towers had 110 floors. So to me, that means Ground Zero became the 111th floor. New York was the 11th state to be constituted. The towers that were actually built by the elite, people that I'm referring to, because ultimately that was the money that built them, took 11 years to build as well. So you can start saying that's coincidence though, so I won't get too far into that. But this reverence they have with the 11 comes from many things, but one of them is the pyramid. So if you times 11 by 11, you get 121. So you get 1, 2, 1. So you get a pyramid. And if you times 111 by 111, you get 12,321. So you get a pyramid every time you times it together. And we all know the symbology of the pyramid with the Freemasons as well. And what that pyramid represents is, the system is to have an elite pinnacle of the pyramid. You have to have everything below, including you and I. You have to have working class persons at the bottom. And you even have to have something supporting those working class persons, which I'll get onto. So the pyramid, for the elite to be at the top, that's what that comes from. This is why they hold, among other reasons, why they hold the 11 in such high regard, with such reverence. And as I say, the 9 as well, and the 22. And it's evident if you look at world events, which could have arguably, if you look at world events that could have been, let's say, manipulated by human interaction, if they had a numerological belief, you can see other goings on. For instance, it just so happens that JFK was shot on 22/11. If you're in the UK, you'll know that on the 11th minute of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, we hold a minute's silence for our war dead. Lots and lots of 11s. Arguably, when you have so much power and elitism, in situations like World War II, you know, where, yeah, for sure, you have an ally force and an opposing force fighting one another, but when you take a look at the business aspect of it, for all there was a war going on, there were people sitting in the middle who weren't taking sides, who were creating a lot of wealth for themselves whilst these wars were going on. So there was a human elitist input into what was going on. So they could have easily, given the fact they were funding the weaponry on either sides and the money for either sides, etc., they could have had an input in who called off the war and at what time, ultimately, or when the armistice would be signed, etc. So that stuff with 9/11, the numerology, just, you know, it makes you ask questions, because there's many events on the planet that include their numerological systems, and you can say it's coincidence, but to me it's a bit, you have to ask the question. So because of that, I did ask the question. And I think the most interesting thing for people who don't know a lot about the unusualness of 9/11 is a recent court case in the UK. A man refused to pay his TV licence because he said he would be supporting an organisation that had something to do with terrorism. So the reason he said that is 23 minutes before the tower, World Trade Center 7, the third tower that collapsed. The BBC reported on it. They said it had collapsed, and it was even in the background when they did it. So what this man had said was that this media outlet had prior knowledge to the day's events, that they were involved with the same elite persons who were trying to gear the whole of the planet towards a one world government, using vast resources, including, you know, having people inside the governments and having control of the media, which is evidence that is true. You do have those elite families that control aspects of the government and control most of the mainstream media is owned and controlled by 6 families. So it's evident that that is the case. So this is what he said, and he said they had prior knowledge, so he refused to pay his license because they were involved with terrorism. And he was not prosecuted because the judge could not argue the fact that it's true, they did report on it 23 minutes early, and they came out with the ridiculous story that some firefighters had said there was a fire in there and it got misconstrued that it was going to collapse. Problem with that is a high-rise building in the history of mankind has never collapsed through structural issues caused through fire and stuff like this. So this meant, for those of you who don't know, there's tens of thousands of structural engineers, men who do this for a profession, and architects as well on top of that, have set out a petition to have 9/11 reinvestigated. The reason being, World Trade Center 7 fell at free fall speed. So free fall speed is to do with physics, and if you don't understand physics, I can tell you now, without physics you can't build a helicopter or an aeroplane or send satellites into space, so you couldn't have the internet and stuff like that. It's those laws of physics that we've done over and over again with science to build such things, so they can't be argued. They are factual laws, they can't be changed or manipulated. And gravity is one of the things in question. World Trade Center 7 on video fell at free fall speed. This has been proven by the investigators of that day. For something to fall at free fall speed, according to physics, there has to be no resistance. For there to be no resistance for a building to do that, there has to have been something that took the supports out, so a controlled demolition. It has to be. It's not physically, mathematically, scientifically, in any which way, shape or form possible for it to have not have been a controlled demolition if the building fell at free fall speed. But these persons in the government told an out and out lie and said it was an office fire. So those of us who have knowledge on physics and stuff, we know that they're lying. Now the problem is, it doesn't matter to them that a small pocket of the consciousness knows what's gone on or has an idea that something untoward has gone on, because it's the vast consciousness that matters. It's the majority, and if the majority are on side with them, then it's irrelevant to them. So this is where it comes in, because, well, this is where you've got to admit that's a little bit suspect that the BBC knew the tower was going to fall 23 minutes before it did. And a tower has never collapsed from an office fire, and that was their reason, that some firefighters had said there was a fire and they misunderstood and said it collapsed. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. I have no trouble believing that media outlets are sometimes fed the information prior to it going on. Because consciousness, the way humans think, is the most precious resource in the system. You can have all the gold and oil and land in the world, but if people don't think the way you want them to think and they don't buy into those things, then you're not worth a thing. You're not worth anything without the people putting you to the top of the pyramid. So human consciousness is the most important resource. So what will be the tools to control that? Well, media is one. But the other thing is fear in world events. So if you need, for example, you know, off the back of 9/11, what did go on exactly? Everyone says it was Bin Laden and stuff like this. Another interesting thing, by the way, is the Pennsylvania plane. The black box was destroyed in the fire, but the passport of one of the hijackers was not. Well, that's weird that a piece of paper wasn't destroyed, but the indestructible black box, which meant no one could find out the information of the flight, was. So it's all a bit strange. So the thing is, with regards to this, if you wanted to control consciousness, then just for argument's sake, doing something, for instance, if that was your goal, to expand your world into a one world government, into a one world order, which the UN has initially said in its meetings in the 60s that that's what it was there for, after the Fabians converted themselves into the UN. So the outcome of 9/11 was that everyone became very fearful of terrorist attacks. It was a tragedy, and I remember the shock and fear of the world that something can happen like that in one of these big countries that are supposedly protected by the military, etc., etc. But off the back of that, we went to war in the Middle East. And if you need to be at the top of that pyramid, you're not going to go to war and pull the triggers and press the buttons. The people lower down in the pyramid are going to pull the triggers and press the buttons for the war. That you need the bottom part of your pyramid to fight the war for you. So we did go to war in the Middle East, as all of us know. And in the Middle East, off the back of those wars, everyone's very confused. They're saying we had a Fabian prime minister who said it was because there was weapons of mass destruction and there weren't any, and all this nonsense. But one universal thing that did happen is that the central banking system, which controls the West, which filtering down from there means they can control the media and everything, basically. The technology that we're allowed to use, most of the large food companies and stuff like this, and the policies for the government ultimately, is coming from the central banking system. As Rothschild said, let me own and control the nation's money and I care not who makes its laws. So this is the goal. So the central banking system, so it just so happens that the countries like Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, they all now have Rothschild owned and controlled central banking systems. So behind the scenes of these wars, which have not made anything good come off them, we can all agree with that. Nothing good came of them except the murder of countless innocent men, women and children, and the death of innocent men and women who went over there to fight a war that might not have been even needed to be fought, based on everything we know. So this is like weird, yeah? It's really weird. You've got to start saying that's a bit strange then. You just have to. So the problem is, as I mentioned, the pyramid, is that people are inside that pyramid. We are all in part inside that pyramid. So the reason they're at the top is they have a disregard for human life, and this is one of the ignorance they have that keeps them at the top. Hold on, before I get on to that, so something that keeps getting mentioned to me is this month, September 25th, people keep saying, oh, what's going on? And I didn't know about this. Apparently there's something going around the internet that's another, nonsensical, ridiculous doomsday sort of thing. Just ridiculous. If you look at procedure and policy, which is what you should be looking at on the planet, especially anything to do with the UN. So they had a thing, Agenda 21, which was about controlling society ultimately, but making it look like they were going to do lots of nice things. So lots of people know about this now. So there's now the 2030 Agenda, and the 2030 Agenda is dressed up in amongst all nice things again, saying we're going to eradicate poverty and unite nations. But what if you look at what it's actually doing? It's when that UN conference goes on at the end of September, the end of this month, it's actually basically saying that in a very short period of time we're going to aim to have a one world government again. And they're already halfway there. You have test parts of this, like the European Union. You've got Middle Eastern Union, African unions. All you need to do is join the unions and you've got a one world system. Again, something they've aimed for, and most powerful men have aimed for throughout history. Humans haven't changed that much in their consciousness, just in their tactics. So the Romans try to do it by force. It doesn't work because people rebel. But if you do it from the shadows, then you've cracked it, because everyone doesn't know. Everyone thinks, oh yeah, it's great. We have a new one world system, one army, and it's all good. No one can ever have a fight again. But the thing is, who's in control of the army, yeah? And who's in control of legislation? The wealth, the power, the elite again. The same elite that believes that the ends justify the means, which is an alarming thing, but that's what they believe. So, if the ends justify the means, then they'd quite happily kill people if it makes the collective consciousness then go to wars that shouldn't be being fought and expand their empire. They just would. So that's part of their policy. The ends justify the means. Luciferian, Freemasonic, Fabian insanity. So that pyramid is what I was going to say. So inside that pyramid you have this pinnacle of ignorance and a lack of love and respect for other humans. They believe their bloodline is the best, their bloodlines are the best on the planet, so everyone below that doesn't matter. And if you don't know about this stuff and your head's like, no, there's no way that can be the case, just look in America at the Georgia Guidestones. There's a granite memorial that says they want to get the global population below 500 million. This is happening in front of you. You just need to look. And they're so open about it because the mass consciousness in that triangle, in the pyramid, they feed on the entertainment that's given to them, the drugs that are given to them like alcohol and a lot of the processed foods and stuff, and also the tainted water supplies, which I'll get onto in another video. But they do this and you're inside there and you're not questioning, you're not learning about yourself, about life, you're just following the crowd and you're inside their pyramid. And so long as you remain in there and you keep swallowing their entertainment and you keep swallowing the drugs they tell you to swallow like alcohol, you're never going to be aware of them. So you're perfect for them. You're like a beehive, you know, and this is how it is. But then you have other people inside the pyramid and they know about the pinnacle and they're angry. And this is where I get frustrated, because they say we've got to stop these elitists and it's terrible, but you're fueling them inside there. Their ignorance and lack of respect and love for the people below them inside their pyramid scheme of elitism, you know, pinnacle being the elite and everyone below getting lower and lower in the... When it gets to you, you're here. Those among you who, for example, the best example, are consuming other life forms to survive when you don't need to, who are eating meat, you're adding to the pyramid. You put down other sentient life below yourself. So you join in. So you want them to stop. You want them to stop their ignorance. You want them to stop being not loving. You want them to stop thinking that their lives matter more than another life on the planet. But you don't want to do it yourself. You still want to keep consuming other life to carry on and stuff like this. You can't be part of the pyramid and want the pyramid to collapse. You've got to step out. You have to step out. And if you can step out of the pyramid... I'm losing my voice. Sorry, hold on. I was losing my voice there. So, if you want to step out of the pyramid, if you want the pyramid to stop, if you want the elitists to come off the top of their elitist pyramid and stop having so much power and control, stop being a foundation for them. And to stop being a foundation for them, you've got to take away your foundations. So when it comes to things like the ignorantly consuming their entertainment, ignorantly consuming the only drug they've allowed you to have out of the millions of stimulants and downers and uppers on the planet, they give you alcohol. There's a reason behind it. And I'll get onto that in another video as well. You've got to stop feeding it. You've got to stop thinking your life is more important than another life just because you feel it tastes good or it's something you're used to doing. They think abusing you further down the pyramid tastes good and feels good and something they're used to doing. They're never going to shift if you can't shift. If you can't shift small things like diet to stop killing innocent beings, why will they stop manipulating and creating wars and killing innocent humans? They just won't. So, that's how the pyramid works. And so many people are angry at them, so many truth seekers, but they don't do anything to change it themselves. They stay inside the pyramid. So you've got to step out the pyramid, you've got to change yourself. And when you do that, the pyramid will start to crumble and eventually the pinnacle will drop off and these elitists will lose control, they'll lose their power. But this is how you have to do it. You've got to take away their foundations, and when you're their foundation, you've got to take yourself out of the equation. And the best way to remove yourself is to remove your foundations as well. What are the things that you're abusing below you? What are the things that are propping you up inside the pyramid? Have a dwell on it, have a meditate on it. You know, like I say, entertainment, alcohol, consuming animals for no reason, because there's no reason to kill a life. Just the same reason, there's no reason for them to abuse us and manipulate us with media, but they do. So that's my bit on 9/11. It's all very confusing and suspect, and as I said, the most key thing is that date is, for me, the numerology is steeped on Freemasonic numerology. And it's a tragedy that those people lost their lives that day, whatever did go on. But what you can't deny is that because of what happened that day, we now have Rothschild central banks in the countries we went to war with off the back of that day. And you now have a world which has surrendered a lot of its freedoms because for the sake of being protected from something. Now the question is, if there's not something there to protect, then again, how do you get people to surrender their freedoms? You scare them. You scare them. So who knows what went on? But what I do know is, without any shadow of a doubt, is that the American government are lying, because they're saying that building fell from an office fire and structural damage from that collapse, but it fell at free fall speed, so it was a controlled demolition. Science is a fact. There's only one truth on your planet. Science is a fact. And for those of you, like I say, who keep asking about September 25th, it's merely the beginning of the agenda, the 2030 agenda. So it's merely another stepping stone for the UN to start bringing in the one world system, which they've been slowly chipping away and bringing in using gradualism, one of the Fabian principles, for a very, very long time. And before anyone gets onto the labels Freemason, Fabian, it's all about elitism at this point. Yeah, they are all together, and they all have very unusual beliefs, as the Georgia Guidestones shows you if you do some research. So yeah, let's not forget the poor people who died this day all those years ago, and the family members they left behind. But if there's even a glimmer, even a hint that there's something wrong with the information that's been given to us regarding the events that went on that day, and the fact that the BBC reported that the tower fell 23 minutes before it did, is indeed a glimmer and a hint, and it needs to be looked at for the sake of those people, for the sake of the families, and for the sake of the rest of us left on Earth, who, off the back of what went on that day, ended up with a completely different planet altogether. We ended up with wars in the Middle East, we ended up with stopping searches on people based on terrorism laws, we just ended up with less rights, and we ended up in a planetary system of fear. You know, there's a lot of people were scared off the back of that. So we do need to ask the question, and if you're not informed about it, you need to get informed, because one last thing is a lot of people switch off and say conspiracy. The true conspiracy is the way that the mass media has manipulated that word inside the consciousness of humanity. When normal, educated, well-educated people in tens of thousands come together and say something's wrong with that, and the masses can dismiss it by saying it's conspiracy, that can only happen because the internet media and the mainstream media have programmed the consciousness of the masses to have this switch off button when it comes to the word conspiracy. So they hear conspiracy, it's nonsense. And that's done by media. That's done by media. Otherwise, when there's tens of thousands of architects, structural engineers, and highly educated men and women speaking out and saying something's not right about what went on that day, and the masses go with the singular voice on the TV and not all the other people who stand to gain nothing from saying this, then you can see that the media is very effective in what it's done to the consciousness of people. And we have to be careful of that. We have to think for ourselves. That's why you need to remove yourself from the pyramid, switch off the TV, and start going within, start meditating, and being patient. You're not going to switch a button like this, you need to be patient. You know, you've been ruining your mind with television and stuff for a long time, most of you. You need to get some time for your mind to process that stuff out, so you can start going inside yourself, so you can start getting right into the middle of you, so you can start functioning as the human being you're supposed to be, not as the member of society that entertainment and the elite systems create you to be. So, okay. Bye guys.